Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that generous introduction. And thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to spend the evening with you. Before we begin, I'd also like to extend my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, pay my respects to the elders past and present, and extend those respects to anyone in the room with a connection to the world's oldest continuing culture. It is my very great pleasure this evening to introduce Maddy Thorson and Noel, the developers of Celeste, Towerfall, and as certified game maker kids, dozens, if not hundreds, of very, very tiny games. Please make them very welcome.
Hello. Wonderful to be here.
So as I can see, 72 of you have already figured out on your own. We are taking questions via the QR code that's on the slide here. I will be folding some of them throughout the conversation and then making sure I leave some time for even more at the end. So I really encourage you, given the volume of questions that have already come in, to have a look through and upvote the ones that you're really excited about, as well as adding your own. With that housekeeping done, Maddy and Noel, I would love to hear a little bit about your introduction to game making. How did you get your start as a game maker kid?
Yeah, Game Maker Kid implies, we start with Game Maker, the tool. I think it's pretty well known now.
Yeah.
It's like a professional tool at this point. When we started using it, it was maintained by a single Dutch game studies professor, I think.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, Mark Overmars, yeah. Costs like $15. Yeah, and we both started with that. And the great thing about Game Maker was that it came with like the built-in scene of like all the other Game Maker kids. And so it was just really nice to have a place to share your work, like to release your games and have people actually care about it, even though it's terrible.
Yeah, it was a really easy way to get into actually making games because you could download the tool really fast and then drag and drop blocks in and play stuff and then upload it, and people in the forums would play it or make fun of you or whatever. It's fun.
This sort of fast, loose and quite collaborative approach to game making is pretty reflective of how Celeste sort of had its genesis. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about the game's early days, the first, 4 days it was made in?
Yeah, so
Celeste Classic?
Maddy and I were roommates through 2012 to 2016 or 2017. And so in, I guess, 2015, I don't know, yeah. I was looking online and I found a tool called Pico 8, which is like a small tool to make games in. And I thought it looked really cool. And so I just asked her if she wanted to like make, that one. I just asked her if she wanted to make something fun with me just over a weekend, kind of, just as like a break from our normal projects. Because I think you were done Towerfall by then. So it was kind of just...
Yeah, I don't think I was working on anything.
Yeah, just hanging out.
Yeah.
You're like, I have 4 days to spend on a project that I'll probably never think about again. It won't change my life at all. 10 years later.
Yeah. And so, we just downloaded Pico 8 because it looked really cool and made something small, which was this.
Yeah, I really like the constraints. I think Pico 8 appealed to us because of the constraints.
Yeah, totally. I think
the idea of just not having a lot of... It even constrains how much code you can have in your game. Yeah, which is really cool.
I think after Celeste, they added more, like you can do more code blocks than you could. But at the time, it was like only a certain amount of tokens or something.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what those constraints are and how they manifested in Celeste Classic?
Yeah, so it only lets you have a certain amount of colors, and it has a really small screen resolution of like 128 by 128. And then it limited everything, so you could only have so much sprite space, so much map space, and so much code space, so much sound space, etc. So it influenced it a lot because you could only do so much with it.
Yeah, we maxed it out too.
Yeah, we
Pretty
were,
much every vector.
yeah.
And which isn't like it was pretty tight constraints back then. I think like you said, they increased it since then,
But I think it influenced a lot of what Celeste kind of at its core is. Like this version was only single screen and didn't have climbing, but a lot of the basic idea is there, and I think a lot of it is because of the constraints that we had. Like we could only do certain things, and so it forced us to kind of do that.
Yeah, I love how it makes you like really zero in on the core of what you're trying to do because of the constraints.
And thinking of the core of what you were trying to do, I know you've talked about Celeste as being sort of designed with speedrunning in mind, if not for speedrunners explicitly. Could you tell me a little bit more about what that looks like in terms of a kind of design influence and how it manifested in this Pico 8 Celeste?
Yeah,
I feel like for the Pico 8 version, we weren't really thinking about speedrunning that much. Like after the Pico 8 version, then 100% we were thinking about speedrunning because people started playing, like speedrunning it. But
yeah, someone ran like Celeste Classic at SGDQ, I think. It was like a 1 minute run.
Yeah.
And it, and it was incredible.
Yeah, it was super cool.
And we had always wanted to make a game for speedrunners. And so we just were like, oh, people like it kind of opened our eyes to what we could do with the full game.
I watched that run, I think, before this talk, and what fascinated me about it was the runner sort of introduced the game before, like, playing it, and was immediately starting to break it. Immediately was going, like, well, these spikes, if you do this, then they can't hurt you. So it's kind of, from its very earliest days, that's been a feature of how people play.
Yeah. I mean, the Celeste Classic is broken in some pretty gnarly ways, too. Like, because we made it so quickly, there's, like, bugs with, like, the fundamental physics of how the character moves that we didn't really know about. Like, speedrunners knew about pretty much immediately, but we didn't know about until we had to recode the game to put it into the full release. Because we had to rewrite it in C#, and then we were like, wait, none of this math is right.
When you were starting to remake Celeste Classic in a new engine, having had the sort of quite fortuitous experience of seeing people play the game kind of almost before you start making it, I'm interested to know how you approached rebuilding it, if there were things that you kept that you might not have expected to, or things you knew had to carry over.
Right. I think the dash was like the central aspect of it. I think the dash and the strawberries were the two things. There was like, these need to be there. Well, I guess the fact that she's climbing a mountain at all, but and then it just felt like there wasn't enough of a skeleton there to build a full game around. So that's where the climbing came from. And also like, ties into the mountain climbing theme and contrasts with the dash in fun ways. But as far as things we kept, the memorial.
Yeah, that was in the original. But I think at the start, like when we first started Larger Game, the plan was to basically just make the same game but slightly larger. Like I think we weren't even sure if it was going to be more than one chapter. Like we didn't have the concept of chapters, but it was kind of like, well, just make this game but a bit bigger and see where that goes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It felt like making chapter 1 at the very start, before chapter 1 was even a city. It was just like kind of like making the game again.
Yeah.
And we're like, maybe this will be the whole game.
Yeah.
I think this sense of trying to expand a game where you've described one of its strengths being that it has been sort of winnowed down to only its core concept seems like a deceptively complex task to undertake. How did you approach expanding Celeste enough to be a commercial release without expanding it much further?
Yeah. I think we really wanted to use a light touch. Yeah. Like I said, expanding the moveset was it felt like we had to if we wanted to get more than 30 levels out of it. So we prototyped. The climbing was pretty quick, and then we prototyped also carrying and throwing objects, which we didn't end up using till much later. But yeah, I think we are kind of minimalists in general. So we wanted to be careful not to add too much.
Yeah. Trying to think. Yeah. I mean, it felt like at the time we were just like making levels and seeing where it went, and it just kept going until it kind of ended. It felt like fairly organic of like, okay, this is fun, and we kind of stopped when it felt like there wasn't stuff to explore anymore, right?
Yeah, and a lot of decisions were done on necessity of like, okay, so Pico 8 is 128 by 128 square, and then we were like, okay, now we're making like a real game. And so those are like widescreen. So then we figure out like what our resolution is, and then the levels have to adapt to that, to that new aspect ratio, and then the moveset has to adapt to the new size of the levels. And so it's kind of like this, there's a snowball that's rolling before you're even making decisions, really, where you're just kind of like putting one foot in front of the other.
And this is where the climb made its entry to the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the climbing was primarily trying to contrast with the dash of like, it's like a more slow and methodical form of movement, whereas the dash is like fast and chaotic. And then they both have their own limited resources of stamina versus, you get one dash in the air.
Unless.
Unless.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that I think the climbing was there from like almost the immediate prototype, like the moment that you started coding the larger version. I think it was like,
yeah, it was like the first thing
you
tried.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, because we were bouldering at the time, and it was like really inspired by
Climbing walls.
Yeah. Oh, does that mean something different in Australia?
No, you're safe. Unless I'm out of the loop too, which is definitely possible.
But it was really inspired by that experience of like, limited resources and being safe versus like being on holds where you're like expending energy just by being there. Yeah.
So you have described the movement in the gorgeous Celeste Classic as being pretty broken on a sort of mathematical level. I'm interested to know how you went through the process of fine-tuning the movement in Celeste, given it is really a game about moving, like the game about moving up.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's like a pure movement game. Going through and fine-tuning the movement, I guess.
Just a lot of slow iteration, I think. It was just kind of like playing it and seeing how it felt, and then watching other people play it. We had a lot of people, like just friends, come over and play it and just see like how, like what stuck with them and like what didn't. But it felt like a very slow, just kind of like tweaking little numbers and seeing how that felt. Yeah,
a lot of playtesting, especially with all the sort of the little ways the game is forgiving. Those came in with playtesting. And then a lot of decisions were, just from the jump to higher resolution and levels where the camera can move.
I feel like if you saw like the first version of Celeste that we had when we first started making a larger version, and you saw the end, you would notice differences, but in terms of how Madeline moves and stuff like that. But I think it's it was such a gradual kind of like, oh, tweak this number a tiny bit and make her jump a little bit higher or lower or things like that, that it's hard to like pinpoint like exactly what happened.
Yeah, definitely.
There are a few decisions about the movement in a game that is known for being challenging that are specifically intended to make it a little bit more forgiving, to sort of take the punishing edge off the challenge, I suppose. I wonder if you could talk through a couple of these and how they got implemented.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we've got... Here we go. Who's this?
Coyote time. Yeah, so basically you run off the ledge and you have a window where you can jump even though, you shouldn't be able to. This one's pretty standard. I think a lot of games have this. Yeah, I think like the Uncharted games have this. And
One thing you did with this when you were like implementing this version of it though, that I think is kind of interesting is that like when I've implemented it before, I just kind of like, oh, you can still just jump, but you actually snap her Y position, like her vertical position back to where the platform was, which, yeah, I had not thought of before.
right, yeah. Just because the game is so reliant on like subpixels, right? So you want your jump height to be consistent.
So playtesting played this really big role in Celeste's development, and you have talked about the game as being quite inspired by speedrunners. Were you working closely with the speedrunning community while playtesting and sort of iterating on the game?
I think not pre-release. Pre-release, the only speedrunner playing it was Kevin, who is our sound designer. And he had a huge influence over, you know, the speed tech that was in the game at the start.
Yeah, like he wanted the golden strawberry you get from not dashing.
Oh yeah, that was his
like
idea.
Yeah, like that was his, because he was like trying to break the levels and like, I think I can do this level without dashing, or yeah, without dashing.
If you change this, if you move this one
Yeah,
block,
if you move this one block, I can do this.
Go on.
Yeah, he's like, please put this block here and put that one there, and then I can do this. I really want to do this. So yeah, he was doing stuff like that while we were making it, which like definitely inspired a lot of the kind of, you know, direction everything went.
We did have some speedrunners come by when we were at PAX and play the game, and they found a lot of bugs.
That's good, yeah.
So a lot of these little more forgiving sort of movement adjustments, they're some of the things that have facilitated some of the incredibly wide and outrageous array of speedrunning techs that people have found in this game. I wonder if there are particular ways that you saw people play Celeste in those early days that really like shocked or surprised you.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, just sheer execution was definitely a big thing of like, even if they're not doing something we didn't know they could do, it's just like the degree to which they had mastered the game was wild immediately.
Yeah, I feel like coming out of Towerfall, there was stuff that, you know, we intentionally added out of that because it was like cool, like the tech and, you know.
Yeah, the hyper jumping was straight from Towerfall.
Yeah, but that was a bug in Towerfall, and then it was like intentionally incorporated.
It was a bug that a playtester didn't want to tell me about because he didn't want me to take it out of the game.
So you've been betrayed by speedrunners your whole career, is what I'm hearing.
Trust issues, yeah.
So like Celeste had a lot of that stuff intentionally there, like we knew about it, but then the degree to which people took it, I mean, yeah, it was.
But then there is stuff we didn't know about too.
Oh yeah,
demo dashing.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, demo dashing's the big one, which is where you jump in a crouch or no, you crouch and you dash on the same frame, which basically just lets you dash sideways with a smaller hitbox, and then you can go between spikes that look like they are a solid wall.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people found that we were not expecting, but then just the degree to which they could push the stuff that we even did know about was like really ridiculous.
Yeah, I didn't know about corner boosting. Like I implemented the dash corner correction, which is the one on the top left, and on the bottom right, I think that's called corner boosting, which is not something that was intentionally added, but nevertheless.
I'm interested to know when speedrunners find things that were perhaps not intentional exploits, are there things that have been found that then later influenced the game's design in either direction? Either you went, this has got to go, you're not allowed to do this anymore, or okay, more of this then. More of this mistake, please.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely both.
Yeah, both. Like if stuff was not fun for anybody, and we felt that it would like you had to do it to be fast, but like everybody hated it, we hated it, the speedrunners hated it, then we would try to like find ways to fix it, because otherwise it's kind of like, well, no one's having a good time.
Yeah, I mean, someone was always having a good time.
Yeah,
there was always someone mad when we took anything out.
But sometimes it had to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Celeste is unusual in that we were attempting to apply game design to the speedrun, which most games don't do, right? And some speedrunners didn't like that, But I think, yeah, like ultimately our vision of what the speedrun could be, I think turned out to be fun for lots of people. So.
And we tried not to overstep in terms of like, oh, this is a cool bug. And it might not be how we intended things to go, but it's cool, and everyone, is liking it. It's like, why would we touch that? Like that, I don't want to like step on people's toes.
Yeah, or incorporate it. Like the demo dashing I mentioned, we eventually added that as a keybind, so to make it easier to do.
Question from the audience in here, from Violet, who asks, what was the biggest hurdle in creating Maddy's physics and movement in Celeste? Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty easy.
Her hair was annoying to get right. I coded the hair, so that took me a while.
Yeah.
But it's not actually very complicated. I was just not good at it.
I think this is like really technical and specific, so I apologize. But I think it's like with moving platforms. I'm trying to think of how to describe this. So moving platforms, when Maddy's on them, if you jump off of them, you get a boost in the like how they were traveling. But that's actually kind of hard to calculate for platforms that don't move with linear velocity. Like if a platform is like lerping, is using like a formula to calculate its position across a path, it's actually kind of hard to calculate what the boost should be when Madeline jumps off of it. And there were so many bugs, and I spent a lot of time there.
Was there anything that ended up being cut from the game during development, either because too annoying to implement or we have to stop working on this game eventually, both of which are incredibly valid reasons for doing so?
Basically, chapter 6, the reflection, that went through a lot of iteration. There was versions of that level that...
It was a water level.
Yeah, it was all underwater. There was a version, and I guess chapter 5 too had way weirder stuff.
Chapter 5, after you go through the mirror, that got completely redesigned.
Yeah, there was missiles, almost super
there
missiles
was
and stuff. It was kind of weird.
Instead of the monster chasing you, it was an eye on a wall that would shoot projectiles at you. But it was.
Yeah, it was the eye, the creature that's there when you stomp on it and it wakes up again. That was as a single mechanic, standalone. There's things that
you can stomp on them, yeah.
And but then it turned it got combined.
Oh, I see. Yeah. It did the push.
Yeah, it just did that as a standalone thing and then got combined into a monster and stuff.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think that got changed also for thematic reasons. It was game design, but also it felt weird that you had all the agency.
Yeah.
Right? And we wanted the creature to be chasing you more actively. And that was a big reason why that changed.
There's another question here from an anonymous question asker who asks, what was hardest, designing the game or playtesting the game? And I really want to, expand this out a little bit more. When you're developing something that is entirely yours, it just lives with you, versus continuing to develop material or content or updates for a game that exists in public, that has an audience. What are the differences between those two experiences? How do the pressures or priorities change?
I think, with Celeste post-release, I think my my instinct is I want to change things so that they are the way I want them to be, but then I forget that people are attached to the way it already is. And I think that causes some friction sometimes. I think we've learned from that. So that's a big part of it. And that also makes us a lot more careful thinking about what we're going to release, knowing that once it's out there, it's almost to a lot of people, it feels like it's carved in stone, whereas to us, it feels oh, maybe we'll change. Maybe we'll just change it.
Yeah, especially once speedruns exist around it and stuff, and if I change this, then it actually breaks every single speedrun ever, which is not ideal. So I don't really want to do that.
Or like tassing, like
yeah,
a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Mods or
Yeah, and it breaks all the mods. So yeah, it becomes more of a conscious, like when you're making a game before it's out, it's kind of like whatever happens, and you can throw out everything and it doesn't matter. But then yeah, once people are like, yeah, there's mods and there's speedruns and there's tasks and there's people who have things or just like they like it a certain way. Yeah, it's a bigger conversation around like the how much stuff am I going to potentially break?
Yeah, it's like not just your game anymore.
Yeah.
Like other people have some form of ownership over it too, in like a creative sense, right? Yeah, like by playing it and just getting attached to it. Yeah, like changing that out from under them feels kind of violent to them, I think.
Are you telling me this is not entirely your doing?
That's the moving platform shit.
I have to read. I cannot do 90% of the Celeste speedrun text to save my life. So I relied quite a lot on the wiki and on other guides to like find videos of people doing that. And I just want you to know that this GIF, when I downloaded it, the title of it was "Reverse Hyper into Bunny Hop into a Corner Boost which launches Madeline through the next room.gif." Which I can only assume is a pitch perfect description of what is happening. To me, it looks like alchemy.
That must be like the maximum file name on Windows or something. Like
honestly.
I love the names for the tech, like and people. I think trollingly they'll be like, "Oh, it's a choost," like or like just stupid names for stuff. I love it.
So Celeste is out in the world. There are people doing this sort of black magic inside it and with it, and you still have to fix bugs and issue updates. I'm interested in your thought process around that. What makes a bug worthy of fixing versus maybe an exploit that you didn't anticipate but that you would keep in because people are using it?
Yeah, it's definitely subjective to some degree. I mean, like the one that's really black and white to me that comes to mind is menu storage. Do you remember menu storage?
yeah.
Yeah, it was like a way that you could like open the pause menu. I don't even remember. It was like the game would think the pause menu was open, but it wasn't. So the camera would just get completely confused and you'd go out of bounds. And it just felt like it wasn't in the spirit of the speedrun, if that makes sense. Because we've always seen the speedrun of Celeste as a pure movement thing. So glitches that are more, I don't know. The only way I know how to describe it is like Zelda-coded glitches. Like that kind of stuff we feel like we have a pretty hard line on. But then, yeah, for stuff that is movement glitches, there is still some stuff we would take out or tone back. And it really was just us trying to, like I said, apply game design to the speedrun because we wanted the speedrun to be fun, like a valid's the wrong word, a fun way to play the game.
It's really easy when the bug just like hard crashes the game because then like that's something I can fix and no one will complain hopefully because it just turns off the game. So
long as you don't move that block back,
yeah.
I think you'll be fine. Speedrunning, modding, practices like these are typically seen as sort of counter to the intended design of a game or the designer's intentions. I'm interested to know what your experience was actively engaging with communities, creative player communities who perhaps wouldn't have anticipated that or in fact actively anticipated not being catered to or communicated with.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when we've talked about this before, where like when you you release something, it feels like it kind of becomes not your thing as much anymore. Like it's still like, we made it and stuff, but then what happens to it after that is definitely like how people interpret it and how people play it and how people, react to it. And so I feel like that's kind of part of that for sure.
Yeah, it's like a letting go process. Sorry, I'm very jet lagged. Can you can you remind me of the question?
Working with speedrunners,
Oh, yeah.
communities who are kind of like doing something sort of counter.
Yeah,
To
it's
typical
messy.
gameplay.
I mean, because it's not like there's consensus on their end, right? Because they're not a monolith, and then there's often disagreement between you and them. Speedrunners will often be really understanding about you fixing stuff for the casual player, but then the thing I ran into was there's like a subset of speedrunners who don't want you to apply game design to the speedrun. They want an adversarial relationship with the game, right? So if you're changing stuff to make the speedrun more fun, or which is subjective from the developer's point of view, to them that's like ruining their fun of like they think speedrunning is in spite of you. Like, yeah.
What is your subjective view of more fun? Because you've invoked it a couple of times, so
Yeah.
I think I want to know.
It depends on the day, I think. And
in game design and speedrunning, Celeste specifically.
yeah. I think it's definitely like movement focused. It's definitely like, in one word, it's movement. It's like it just feels really good to go fast in like a flowy way where you're kind of breaking the game, but it's almost like you're at a truce with the game. Like the game knows you're breaking it, and yeah, there's like a sweet spot there where you're not like zipping through solids and menu storage and completely like wrong warping everywhere, but you are doing what's on the screen, right?
It's really interesting that you talk about the game as belonging in part to the players and them being and the community and their agency, when it sounds like some players have gone, no, it's not. It's yours, and we're doing something to it. It's
I
different.
reject this.
But that hasn't been your experience totally consistently. I know you talked about working with speedrunners when designing Farewell. Could you tell me a little bit about that sort of more collaborative side of engaging with that community?
Yeah, that was really fun. I mean, Farewell was just sort of us inspired by the reception to the game and wanting to make more of it with the context and knowledge of having seen people play it and speedrun it and everything.
Yeah, it was kind of gradual too. Like when we first released the game, we were basically just doing bug fixes and stuff. And I don't think we thought that Farewell would exist it was kind of a question. Like you would make like a single level and be like, maybe, I don't know, could be something here. And so it was kind of a slow, like gradual, okay, let's like make more. And then, yeah, I think that just comes with like, yeah, but by then obviously we knew how much it meant to speedrunners. And so I think we wanted to make something that would, be exciting to them.
Yeah, and like we designed the original game with wanting it to be speedrun, and now we had seen it be speedrun and seen how, because we can't speedrun, so we had seen how that process works for them, and we could watch their live streams and stuff and like really understand it better. And so designing Farewell was really fun for me, and I had that new understanding, and now I could apply that.
And I think you mentioned, was it the Ultra Dash is the tech that you have not mastered?
Oh,
you
yeah.
got someone to come
I
in
can't
and
even
do it for
it.
you?
Yeah. I had to, there was a room in Farewell I wanted to design around the Ultra Dash. And so I had to go into like the player movement and make it so she automatically like did the inputs on the frame she lands on the ground, because I just couldn't do it.
That actually leads very nicely into an audience question here from Evelyn, who asks, what is your process for iterating upon room designs?
I think it's with playtesting, it's like sanding off the rough edges, but only the ones that prevent the player from experiencing the intended story of the room. Like the room has a concept of like what's exciting about it, and then if there's like everyone's dying on their, like you're supposed to like ride this moving platform and jump off at the right moment, but everyone's dying on the way to the moving platform. It's like, okay, well, make that easier.
Yeah, you still want jagged edges, just the jagged edges that you intentionally put there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another level, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I know
You're good.
you have very enthusiastically taken to the Slido, and so now I am kind of in iPad kid mode a little bit. I apologise. There's another question here from Jam, who asks, how has your approach to level design in platformers evolved?
How's my, sorry, one more?
Your approach to level design in platformers
Oh, evolved.
evolved over time.
I think I guess over the course of, I'm trying to decide where to answer this, like what time frame to answer this for.
Let's start with Celeste Classic.
Oh, okay.
For the sake of this particular moment, and I feel like we can get into broader later on.
Yeah, I think Celeste started off wanting to make something really challenging, and learning along the way that we also wanted it to be very kind. Yeah, and I think that's how that evolved during Celeste. Yeah.
Yep.
No, do you Drew.
I'm here. Yeah.
Cool. So you originally made Celeste Classic in 4 days in a living room because your roommates who like making games. You then decided to develop it into a sort of a game with speed running and movement in mind. But despite this very sort of like mechanical, I suppose, impulse, or like originating sort of idea, one of Celeste's huge and ongoing impacts is both as a queer and trans game and in elevating queer and trans games in the mainstream, and also as an accessible game. I think Celeste's assist mode was certainly one of the first times I'd really heard a really broad conversation about what it can look like to make a game accessible that wasn't just that still allowed you to engage fully and richly with the mechanics. I would really love to hear a little bit about assist mode and how you approached designing it for a game about movement.
I think I was initially way more skeptical of assist mode than Noel, so maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact conversation about it, but I remember us being very unsure whether it was a good idea or not.
I remember you and Amora trying to convince me for a while, and me finally being like, okay, yeah, this might make sense. And then
I think it was sort of about how we had to contextualize it a little bit. Like, it's not just like, we wanted it to be accessible to people and for it to exist, but we didn't want it to just be like...
Yeah, once we decided to do it, then it was the question of how to do it, which I think it was easy for us to decide what the assists are, like the slow time and the, I don't know, yeah, all of them, the invincibility, the infinite dashes, but deciding how to present it to players, that was the really tricky part.
Yeah, because we didn't want to have like difficulty modes or things like that.
We call it like easy mode.
Yeah, call it easy mode. We didn't want to do anything like that because that doesn't fit the game.
I remember Mario Odyssey came out and they called theirs assist mode as well, and we were like, okay, I think we... That was after we already picked the name assist mode, and we were like, it really validated it. So we were like, that's, yeah.
Yeah, but we wanted to like we wanted it to be there so people could, play it, play the full game and stuff. But Yeah, it took a long time to kind of settle on exactly how to present it. And yeah,
Yeah, the idea that you have to activate it before the options show up in the pause menu, like we went back and forth on that. Of like how accessible should it be? Like how much do we trust the player not to ruin their own experience? You know, like these are really
because
hard questions to answer.
you don't want to end up in a situation where a player who would enjoy the game by just playing it normally would then like just turn it on because I'm frustrated at a level, so I'll just turn it on and then skip the stuff that would have been really impactful for them. So we're trying to find a balance between like, yeah, we want it to exist because we want everybody to be able to play it, and we don't want you to, like, if you're not enjoying this part of it, or you just want to have a more accessible time through these parts, we want you to be able to do that, but we don't want you to just like just like disengage from the game.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. And I think that's where the preamble came from.
Yeah.
Where it describes what it will do.
And it wasn't I think we iterated on it a few times because I think the first versions were still kind of condescending. And yeah,
we had some feedback after post-release from accessibility advocates.
Yeah.
It helped us like fine-tune the language.
Because
Derek Yu, the developer of Spelunky, which is another one of my favorite games, wrote a really interesting piece about difficulty modes. He is kind of opposed, and what he talked about was this sense that they can lower player confidence, that people will come in and go like, I'm probably not good at this, I should pick easy mode, rather than giving themselves the trust that they can rise to a challenge. But I think assist mode does a very good job of treading that line. It encourages rather than discourages engagement, I think.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to do, so that's good.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the sort of design features that you iterated on while working on the assist mode.
I'm
not sure if
I think as far as what the assists are, like we basically came up with a list of them, and then Noel made them in like a day.
Yeah, they weren't hard to implement because they were all just things like, you don't get hurt by stuff. Well, that's a really simple check. So I think the actual implementation for assist mode was all of the difficulty around it was us figuring out, do we want to have it at all? How do we implement, like how do we present it to the player? All these kind of like larger design questions, but the actual implementation was kind of just like...
I think that we could have done it better too. Like we added the one assist post-release where when you press the dash button, it freezes the game and you get to pick your direction and then release the button to dash.
I think there's a lot we could have done more for...
I think there's way more we could have done, yeah.
Yeah, for especially like accessibility kind of like input kind of stuff. I think there's a lot more we could have done. But yeah, at the time, that's what we did.
The other huge reverberation of Celeste is, as I mentioned, as a queer and trans game in the public eye. For me, it was certainly one of the first that sort of generated it was an early game to really generate a lot of conversation about mental health and queerness as a subject for games in the mainstream. It obviously has this incredibly beautiful and personal narrative woven through it. Was this sense of making a queer game or making a personal game something that you considered a lot during development, or was this a response that surprised you?
Yeah, I think the amount that people related to it was something that surprised me, and also the fact that it was a queer game surprised me. We definitely wanted it to be personal. Like, it's been our belief for a long time that the best games, the best art is stuff that has the creator's fingerprints all over it. So it just felt natural to try and put my story or my story into this character.
Yeah, like we talked a lot about the narrative as we were making it and how it tied into things and where it went and all that stuff. But I don't think we talked about like the impact we thought it would have on people at all. It was more just like, yeah, how does it all feel and stuff?
Yeah, and that, yeah, like when it first came out, it was very much focused on mental health. And then, yeah, the queer community kind of claimed it, and the conversation evolved. And, you know, I found my own queerness, and, you know, things, the players added a lot of context to the game that helped me understand it a lot better.
It really is sort of a story of things escalating dramatically. Celeste's development, isn't it? Starting as a essentially impromptu game jam and ending up huge breakout hit. Thinking of you coming into your own queerness and finding that part of yourself through the development process, I'm really interested to talk a little bit more about Celeste as a personal narrative. At what point what is your relationship? What was your relationship? Maybe is the best place to start with the narrative of Celeste. This sort of mental health narrative, you said, was how it began, and how did that change as game development continued and as your relationship with your queerness changed?
Yeah, I came in, I wrote the game, I guess, just dealing with a lot of anxiety and a lot of sort of, I guess, upheaval in my life, and trying to find my footing and trying to understand myself better. And I don't think the game goes super specific. It's pretty general, right? Because I didn't fully understand what I was going through. I think the game's story is the story of someone struggling to understand themselves, right? And I think by releasing it, and yeah, the player is adding that context, yeah, it completely changed my understanding of myself and the game.
You confirmed that Madeline is trans in an essay. Is Madeline canonically trans? In 2020, which again generated a huge amount of conversation, not just about the game, but also about you, because it doubled as a public coming out post. I have said this to you off stage, I will say it again on stage. I cannot imagine the pressure you must have felt making such a sensitive part of your life public in that way. And I'm really interested to know how that conversation affected you.
Yeah, I think I don't regret coming out publicly, but I feel conflicted about it, I guess, in that I never wanted to transition publicly. And I think I ended up pulling back from social media and sort of taking my space, which I think helped a lot. But at the same time, I do acknowledge that people wanted to hear an answer to that question. Is Madeline canonically trans, right? And I couldn't answer that question without coming out. So I guess that's why I don't regret it.
Can I ask, when deciding to... So what you're saying now is the question was asked and you decided to answer. A lot of people... There is a world where you decided not to answer. Why was it important to you to speak to that?
I guess because, yeah, it goes back to this idea of like ownership over the characters in the game of like believing that the players do have a right, or not a right, like some level of, there's like a give and take, right? I don't think I owe them, my whole life, complete transparency or anything. But I wanted to honor their relationship to the game and validate their reading of it. Because I thought, because it had helped me, because their reading of it had helped me. So I wanted to give it back to them.
That's a really beautiful answer. I had a final question, but I think that's a lovely note to end our part of the conversation on, and to turn it over to audience questions, which are continuing to roll in at a rapid clip, for which I am very grateful. Forgive me if I scroll a little as I speak, and thank you so much for sending them through. The top-rated question on Slido, by the way, is from Anonymous, and it just says, I would like to wish all the fellow trans people in the audience a very pleasant evening. And so would I. The next top-rated is from an anonymous asker who asked, I loved the music by Lena Raine. Is there anything you specifically asked for in the game's music, and which musical moment was your favourite in the game?
We had like a general direction right when we started, but after that, she just did her thing and killed it.
Yeah, very little. Like we would have conversations about like what, what's happening and like in the game, and
yeah, like context about like,
yeah, we never said like, oh, we want the melody to be like this, or we want, she just kind of took what we were doing and synthesized it into this amazing stuff. I think the only real like direction we gave her was right at the start.
yeah, the very first track. I remember having some back and forth on,
yeah,
and getting the direction kind of right. But then after that, it was just basically like, here's what's happening in the game, and then she was like, okay, here's a cool song for it. Yeah.
My favorite song is Little Goth. It's like when you make up with Battlein. Yeah.
That back and forth, how did that track change?
Oh, it started off a lot more retro inspired. So this was before the game was kind of, we had just started working with her as well. Like we didn't know each other very well. And before the game was kind of well defined, there was only like, it basically looked like Celeste Classic. There wasn't a lot going on, no dialogue.
All my old art or whatever, so it wasn't like what it looks like.
Yeah, basically a stick figure. And I think just in her head, she was thinking it was more of a throwback game. Like a simple retro thing. And we didn't know how big the game would be or what the story would be or anything like that, but we knew we didn't want it to be a retro.
Yeah, that was kind of our direction for sound effects too. It was like, oh, we want the sound effects to feel like real mountain sounds because to kind of fit the game. Because even though the game is pixel art, it's not a retro game in our heads anyways.
There's a question here, again, from another anonymous asker that I like very much. Why strawberry?
Okay, part of it is because the Pico 8 limitation. We wanted something that was kind of a joke, and kind of like old arcade games, kind of, and then you get them like you go like 1,000 up or whatever. And so part of it was because that fit in like the pixel art size we could do for the Pico 8, and then it just kind of carried over. And then once you have something like that that's kind of goofy, you just keep going with it, and it kind of actually becomes sincere. And yeah.
Yeah, and the joke is kind of that they're meaningless, right? Like we were like, there's a collectible. Why would they get the collectible? It's like, well, there's no real reason besides just wanting to get the collectible. And so, make it a strawberry.
If you're already climbing a mountain for no real reason, then why not?
Exactly.
I think I remember there being a similar story with Madeline's hair color changing.
Yeah, that was, I don't know where that totally came from. I made the sprite originally, like I did the character, but I don't know where it all came from. But we needed something to like show if you could dash or not. And the Pico 8 was, the resolution's tiny, so it was kind of like, I think once we had a character with hair, it was kind of like, well, that's the biggest thing on
She
the
was like
screen.
50% hairs.
Yeah, yeah. So it was like, well, what can we change about her to like make it so the player knows if you can dash? And it was like, well, just change the hair color. And it worked really well in that like really low resolution because it's quite a stark difference. But I don't even know why we added hair to her to begin with.
The hair was I know why.
Okay,
The hair is because the hair could be flowy and could follow, like it could communicate motion.
What or when was the moment when you decided to go all in on the development of the game? Marcus asks.
Like, I guess when we started, you were working on another game.
Yeah, I was working on another game, and you'd finished Towerfall.
Yeah.
So I feel like there was like 2 or 3 months where you just kind of were like really slowly prototyping.
It was just me like making. I got up to like chapter 3. It's like no dialogue or anything, just levels and mechanics.
Yeah.
And you were working on it, but not. You were mainly working on your other.
Yeah, I was like very like part time.
And I think at that point, I think you made the decision to pause that one, and we were like, oh, we'll just make this one really quick.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you can go back to it, and then you ended up canceling it, of course. And this game ended up growing a lot.
I think sometimes people are surprised by how much of game development and any creative project is just sort of one thing after another, and then eventually you have a game.
Yeah, it's just like this happened, and then this, like decisions kind of flow into each other. We always talk about it like there's a point making a game in which the game just starts making itself. And like that's where you want to get. Like if you either get there or you cancel the game.
Speaking of, Heath asks, did you ever feel like you wouldn't finish or complete your goals when working on Celeste? And how did you overcome this?
Celeste was overall, like in terms of development, especially like looking back at it, was very smooth. I don't think there was ever a point where we thought Celeste would not get finished because it kind of was just going, like we were just making more stuff and it was, fun the whole time, which, yeah, in retrospect is like not how stuff always goes.
Yeah, Celeste was even under budget.
Yeah, so it was a very like smooth development that we'll be chasing forever now.
That is genuinely the craziest thing a game developer has ever said to me on stage or off stage.
Yeah.
Smooth development and under budget and fun the whole time. I thought you had to pick like 2 of the 3, maybe 1.
Yeah, it's a high
It wasn't
level.
fun the whole time.
No, it wasn't fun. There was challenges to the game. It wasn't like there was,
The worst. Okay, we made the hugest error where we had to crunch at the end,
Yeah,
and the crunch was the one task we left till the end because it was boring, and we just had to do it for like days straight. I fell asleep at my desk like multiple times. It was like we call it detailing the levels, where it's like the levels are just solid blocks with auto tiling, and we have to add all the props and everything. Oh my God.
Yeah, it took forever. We had a friend come over just to like place props in places.
Yeah, but then he was like putting his name in the background.
Yeah,
and I had to go through
we did too much. That was too much. And
Yeah.
I remember at the very end when we were like right going into the lot check, like where you send the game off, like I think it was like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m, and I was playing through the game, and at the very end, Madeline just runs down the mountain like facing the wrong way the whole way, and I was like, oh no.
If you could collaborate or do a crossover between Celeste and anyone else, what would you do?
Waluigi.
Asked and answered. Perfect.
Self-explanatory.
That would be incredible. I was thinking, like, what's the most cursed ROM hack you could do?
That would be awesome.
Apologies for my scrolling. There's quite a technical question here. Violet asks, what techniques did you use to create dynamic audio systems within Celeste, such as how Maddy's actions in the game sometimes impact the music and sound effects?
Honestly, a lot of that is was from Power Up Audio, and Kevin, who did the sound design. Like they were just kind of, they love that stuff and they're awesome at it and they're really excited about the work they were doing. And so I honestly don't even know all the things that they did because it was just their creative kind of vision. So I would implement it for them. But honestly, a lot of it was like Kevin just making calls on stuff and being like, this has to go like this and that. And I was like, okay, Kevin, I'll do what you want.
Wow. Kevin's sort of ghost designer.
Yeah. For sound
Celeste
stuff,
is what I'm hearing.
I definitely think like all of Celeste was a very collaborative thing where everyone had their kind of expertise and they'd do their thing. And I think that's kind of what is part of what's really cool about the game because Kevin, he had a lot of self, like we didn't like tell him to do exactly this or that. It was like he was kind of, his own creative lead on the project. So yeah.
Have you seen much collaboration or inspiration in other games after open sourcing the Madeline movement code? Asks Kate.
Like we also have some other, like I have an article on my website about how we do the physics. And then we have open source the player code. It's hard to tell. Like there definitely are games that feel like they were made in the same way as Celeste, but it's hard to tell like how they got there.
Yeah, I mean, Celeste is written in C# too, which you can decompile really easily. So I'm sure that people have looked through stuff and made interesting decisions. But yeah, it's hard to like pinpoint like any specific game.
Piers asks, new game developers often get inspired by ROM hacking. Was there any influence on Celeste from the fan communities or player creativity of other games? I know you're a proficient ROM hacker.
My ROM hacking career started, I made one before Celeste, but has mostly been post-Celeste. And I don't think it was very inspired actually by, like if I'm speaking honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think for me, but
yeah, I think that's a sad no.
I kind of like that it's the other way around. You're like, well, I made a game and it really inspired me to get into ROM hacking.
Now I'm going to make some Kaizo hacks.
I saw what other people could do to my game and I was like, well. Another design question. As game developers, how did you iterate and polish the ever so gradual difficulty ramp as the game progressed? Was this a hard process? And is there anything you'd change?
I don't think it was hard. It was just painstaking, right? It's just like a lot of playtesting, a lot of iteration, and a lot of hard decisions of like even if a playtester gets stuck somewhere, it's not like you just take it out of the game, right?
you throw it in the B side.
Yeah, I mean sometimes, but there's stuff in the A sides that I still see like forum threads. Like, how do I get past this? Like, especially in the chapter 4, like learning how to steer the blocks. We did our best to like teach that implicitly, but players still get stuck there sometimes, and I don't know. You kind of realize that at some point, if you're making a game that's meant to be challenging, like some amount of players are going to get stuck, and you have to make peace with that. Yeah,
like we never wanted to have like actual like stop and read tutorials and stuff. We want it to be as like kind of intuitive as we could. But yeah, that's just kind of the challenge of making any kind of game like that. Is that finding the balance of like what's intuitive and what's not is a lot of iteration.
Yeah. As far as anything I would change, I don't think so. Like, it's definitely not a perfect game, but it would feel weird to change it now. And
yeah, there's stuff that I like, especially after release. I was like, I really wish that this was different or whatever, but it wasn't. Yeah, I wouldn't change it now because it is kind of what the game is.
Yeah, there's things I would do differently if I was making the game now.
Yeah,
but that's a different question, I think.
What would you do? Okay, to ask a different question, what would you do differently if you were making the game now?
This one's controversial. I don't know how Celeste players are going to feel about this, but I kind of feel like the dash should have been 4-directional, not 8-directional, because diagonal dash.
A murmur runs through the crowd.
Yeah, thumbs down. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would never change that now. That's what Celeste is.
1.5 update.
You can only dashboard. Oh my god. Don't change the levels at all. Yeah. I mean, I've struggled with that.
Why is that?
Well, we've talked about, the possibility of making a sequel someday, maybe. I'm not saying we're making one. But like, that's something I kind of feel like if I just made it 4-directional in a Celeste 2, like what? like, like what's it? You're going backwards in directions, like.
Was there something specific about that directionality that you think either limited you as a designer or changed the way you had to design that you would like? Like, is that where that impulse comes from?
No, it's from. I think the like a lot of Celeste's forgiveness mechanics, like we talked about, like coyote time and stuff, are trying to make inputs less precise, so that you're thinking more about how the character is moving and less about how your hands are moving on the controller. And it's trying to like honor your intentions rather than, just like your raw button inputs. And I think the dash is the next frontier of that, the 8-directional. But it is a trade-off. I do recognize also it's a trade-off of like losing some complexity, and like it would completely change the game. Like it would be, we'd have to revisit many things. So it's definitely not just a simple like. I'm not saying like imagine the game with only 4 directions. It's like no, it would be a completely different game in many ways.
What was it like, Piers asks, to adapt Madeline's movement to 3D for Celeste 64? Were there any challenges that surprised you?
I found the camera stuff really hard to do because it's still not good, but it was, that was really hard.
Yeah, we went back and forth also on like the climbing and how it works when you like climb around corners is like really awkward. It's like that problem of like Mario Galaxy when you run around the planet and suddenly your control stick is like backwards for a second. It's like that whole thing.
We made that game really fast, like in about like under 2 weeks. So I feel like if we had, a year to work on it, then maybe we could solve some of these stuff, like these things better. But
this is like really similar to the previous one, but I think the camera should have been locked to the 4 axes. Like you just rotate it.
You're just like in a mood right now. I don't know.
Yeah, just cardinal directions.
Like if only 4.
No, this is the jet lag.
Yeah, this is like.
It cancelled.
That's right. Controversial, heated gamer moments. 4 directions only. What was it like? This is, I think, a sweet one. What was it like being nominated for Game of the Year as an indie in the late 2010s? 2018 it was?
Yeah, that was wild. Yeah, I don't
Yeah, I haven't. It was weird.
it was an honor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was scary doing the acceptance speech, but
I just stood there, so it was kind of easy.
For developers who are interested in assist modes, but not sure how to begin approaching it, what would you recommend as an early step?
I guess just seeing like if you're going to add an assist mode like that, what the actual contents of it are, and I think playtesting is a good way to figure that out, and talking to also people who you think might need the assist mode, and seeing how it would fit in your game.
Yeah, there's like accessibility, like there's assist mode, but then there's also stuff like with your controls, like if there's any inputs in your game where you have to hold a button for a long period, like consider making a toggle mode for that. Stuff like that. And then for the actual like assist modes that change the rules of the game, I think about the what the main skill checks of your game are and how you could sort of. I always visualize it as like widening a window, of like, here's the timing of like when you have to jump to beat the level, and it's like, well, if you slow the game down by 50%, then the window is double as wide, right? So I think if you can apply that, like that's very specific to Celeste, but maybe take that logic and apply it to your genre.
I think something else I would recommend is that there are heaps of accessibility specialists who you can talk to, and many of them work or consult for sliding scale fees. It's not limited to like big companies who have access to those resources.
Yeah, and there's some really good websites too that kind of go over like, here's like a, for different kinds of parts of the game, controller, audio, or visual, like what things you can do to make your game more accessible. I can't recall the websites off the top of my head, but yeah.
All right. Final question as our beautiful Q&A draws to a close. Thank you so much for coming. This has been just a joy. I hope it's been fun for you despite the jet lag.
It's been lovely.
Thinking back, it's been 10 years since Celeste Classic came out. What do you think has been the creative decision that you're most proud of over that time? It can be a design decision. It can relate to your relationship with the community. It can be deciding to hire Kevin. It sounds like contributed really significantly to the project. One for both of you.
Not really. I'm trying to think. I'm just holding the microphone close to my face. Yeah.
I really want to answer this one because it's a really good question. But
I can vamp.
There's some stuff that isn't a decision that we made, but I think seeing what the community has done with the game coming out of Celeste, because like it surprised us, I guess, because we weren't expecting there to be mods or people to make custom levels or do interesting things on their own with it. And to see that stuff has been really inspiring and kind of changed my perspective on releasing games and making games. Because when we made it, I don't think we thought, or I definitely didn't think even for a single moment about like custom levels or custom stories or things that people could make out of the game. And now there's all these really cool things that people have done with it that I just didn't even perceive as like a possibility. And so that has been really impactful to me and definitely changed my perception of the game and the way, it was perceived and the way it came out. And definitely will change how I make things in the future. But I guess I'm really happy we made the game in C#, so that was possible. Because I didn't intend, we didn't intend for that, so we just kind of got lucky, I think. But yeah.
yeah, I think mine has to be the queerness of it, which is a decision I made subconsciously. Yeah, and it kind of feels like the game. I don't know, this thing with creating art where it feels like the game made the decision, not me, and I'm really thankful for that.
Something in you decided to climb the mountain, and climb the mountain you did. Maddy and Noel, thank you again so much for coming. And thank you, our amazing audience and question askers, for joining us. Please give them a big hand.
Thank you.
Maddy and Noel will be back at ACMI on Thursday from 3 to 4, signing whatever it is you wish in the foyer downstairs. So please feel free to come and say hi then.
Get us to sign something weird.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.